Welcome to the Time Capsule Podcast, where your family history becomes your greatest legacy. I'm Barbara Beauregard, genealogist, educator, author, and creator of the Time Capsule Method, where we explore ways to preserve not just our records and photographs, but the stories, memories, and identities behind them. Today's episode is one that I think will resonate deeply with many of you. We're going to talk about family photographs, not just preserving the photographs themselves, but preserving the names, stories, and memories connected to them before they are lost. Because one of the saddest things many family historians eventually encounter is a box of old photographs with no identification. Unknown faces, unknown weddings, unknown babies, unknown soldiers, entire family stories quietly disconnected from the people who once treasured them. And recently, I had an experience that reminded me just how easily this can happen. So today, I want to talk about why photographs lose their stories over time, how we can prevent this from happening in our own families, practical ways to label and organize both physical and digital photos, how artificial intelligence may help preserve and identify family images, and how all of this connects to the broader philosophy behind the time capsule method. If you've ever looked at an old family photograph and wished someone had written down who the people were, this episode is for you. Recently, my husband and I spent the day antiquing. Now, whenever I walk into an antique shop, one of the first places I'm drawn to is the old photographs. I always stop and look through them, and as I was standing there recently, flipping through stacks of old family pictures, I found myself feeling both fascinated and saddened at the same time. There were wedding portraits, baby photographs, family reunions, military portraits, children standing proudly beside bicycles, couples smiling into the camera, people gathered around holiday tables, moments that clearly mattered deeply to someone. At one time, these photographs were treasured. Someone carefully placed them into albums. Someone saved them in drawers. Someone carried them through moves and life changes. These weren't just photographs. They were memories. But now here they were, sitting in boxes at antique shops, being sold for just a few dollars each. And what struck me most was that most of them had no names, no dates, no locations, no explanations, just faces. Faces of people who laughed, loved, struggled, celebrated, raised families, and lived entire lives. Yet now, for many of them, their identities are likely gone forever. Whenever I encounter old photographs like these, I always turn them over and look carefully at the backs. I look for names, dates, studio stamps, addresses, anything that might help reconnect them to living descendants. Sometimes there's enough information to research the families, and if possible, I try to help return the photographs to relatives who may treasure them, because I know firsthand what it feels like when that happens. Several years ago, I received an email from a gentleman from New York. He was vacationing in Maine and happened to stop in an antique shop. While looking through old photographs, he discovered several images with my husband's grandfather's name written on the back. He contacted me to see if the persons in the photos might be related and asked if I would like them. I was thrilled, absolutely thrilled. Those 4 photographs were precious pieces of our family history that could easily have disappeared forever. I believe I know how they probably ended up there. My husband's uncle had recently passed away at the time, and after the home was cleaned out, the contents were likely sold through an estate liquidation. He had 2 stepsons who were most likely not interested in photos of people they weren't really related to. Without those names written on the photographs, they probably would have become just another pile of anonymous faces in an antique shop, but because someone had taken the time to identify them, those photographs found their way home. That experience stayed with me because it reinforced something very important. Family memories can quietly disappear unless someone intentionally preserves the stories connected to them. And today, that responsibility often falls to us. Photographs rarely lose their meaning all at once. Usually, the process happens slowly. One generation knows everyone, the next generation recognizes only a few people, and by the third or fourth generation, the names may be completely forgotten. Sometimes family members assume, well, someone else knows who these people are, but eventually the family memory keepers pass away. Albums become separated. Boxes are inherited by relatives who may not know the family connections. Photos are removed from albums. Labels fade. Digital folders become disorganized. And over time, the context disappears. I think many people underestimate how fragile family memory really is. We assume stories will somehow survive naturally, but unless information is intentionally preserved, memories often disappear quietly over time. I've spoken with many people who inherited boxes of old family photographs after a parent or grandparent passed away, and they sit there looking at these pictures wondering, who are these people? Was this family? Where was this taken? Why didn't I ask more questions when I had the chance? It's an emotional realization, and it's one many family historians experience sooner or later. One of the best things we can do is start identifying photographs while relatives are still living and able to help. Do not wait for the perfect time. You do not need to organize your entire collection before beginning. Even identifying a few photographs at a time can make a tremendous difference. Bring photographs to family gatherings, reunions, holidays, phone calls, video chats. Ask simple questions. Who is this? How are they related? About what year was this taken? Where was this? What was happening in this picture? Who took the photograph? Sometimes one small detail can unlock an entire family story, and don't underestimate partial information. Even something like, I think that's Aunt Helen's husband, can later become an important clue. Another thing I strongly encourage people to do is record stories while discussing photographs. Often the conversations that happen around old photos become just as valuable as the photographs themselves. A picture may trigger memories about childhood homes, military service, immigration stories, family traditions, weddings, difficult times, or funny moments, and those stories matter. In many ways, preserving the stories behind the photographs is even more important than preserving the images themselves. If you still have printed photographs, one of the simplest and most important things you can do is label them. And I know some people hesitate because they're afraid of damaging the photo, but unlabeled photographs often become unidentified photographs. So the goal is to label them carefully and safely. Helpful information to include may be full names, maiden names, approximate dates, locations, event descriptions, and relationships. For example, John and Mary Beauregard Smith at their wedding, Burlington, Vermont, approximately 1948. That single sentence preserves an incredible amount of context. When labeling photographs, use archival safe pens or soft archival pencils. Avoid pressing hard on the surface. And whenever possible, write gently near the back edges of the photograph. You can also label albums, storage boxes, envelopes, or archival sleeves that they are being stored in. The important thing is consistency. And remember, future generations may not recognize the people who seem obvious to us today. What feels self-explanatory now may become a mystery later. Now let's talk about digital photographs. Many people assume that digital automatically means preserved, but digital photos can lose their stories just as easily as printed ones. In fact, in some ways, digital overload has made this problem even bigger. Today, many people have thousands of images on phones, unorganized computer folders, cloud albums with no descriptions, random screenshots mixed with family photos, and files named things like img4827.jpg. Future generations may inherit the files, but not the context. They may have no idea who the people are, why the photographs mattered, where they were taken, or how the images connect to the family story. That's why digital organization matters. Simple habits can make an enormous difference. For example, rename files with meaningful names, create folders by family line or event, add captions and descriptions, back up photos in multiple locations, scan older printed images, and share identified albums with relatives. Even simple file names like Grandma Rose, Burlington, 1955, are far more meaningful than random number sequences, and backing up photographs is critical. I always encourage people to follow the idea that if your photos exist in only one place, they are at risk. Hard drives fail, phones get lost, accounts disappear. Preservation requires redundancy. Now I'd like to talk briefly about artificial intelligence and family photographs. As many of you know, I spend a great deal of time teaching about ethical AI use in genealogy. And while AI is not magic, it can be an incredibly valuable tool when used thoughtfully. Today, AI tools may help genealogists enhance faded photographs, sharpen blurry images, improve readability, transcribe handwritten notes, organize digital collections, identify possible time periods based on clothing styles or objects, and can even compare visual similarities between images. AI may also help identify landmarks, buildings, or objects appearing in the background of photographs. And in some cases, AI-assisted facial comparison tools may help suggest possible family connections. However, and this is important, AI should always be treated as a research aid, not proof. AI can make mistakes. Historical records, family knowledge, documentation, and careful verification remain essential. I think the most exciting aspect of AI is not replacing genealogists. It is helping us preserve and organize information before it disappears. And that fits beautifully with the preservation goals many family historians already care deeply about. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing they need to organize everything perfectly before they begin. You do not need a museum-quality archive to preserve meaningful family history. You simply need a manageable system. A simple routine might look like this: gather photos, scan older images, label names and dates, organize by family or event, back up copies or share with relatives. That's it. Small efforts done consistently over time are far more valuable than waiting for the mythical day when you'll suddenly have unlimited time and energy. Because the reality is that every year we wait, more information may disappear. Relatives age, memories fade, context gets lost, but every labeled photograph becomes an investment in future generations. One of the core ideas behind my time capsule method is that preservation is not simply about saving photographs, documents, or files. It is about preserving meaning. A photograph may physically survive for generations, yet still lose its true value if no one remembers who the people were, why the image mattered, or what story the photograph represented. The time capsule method encourages families to preserve context, not just images, connect names and stories to photographs, organize memories in ways future generations can understand, combine traditional preservation with modern digital tools, and think intentionally about the legacy we leave behind. Every labeled photograph becomes part of a larger story, a story that helps future generations recognize not only faces, but identities, relationships, experiences, and family connections. And that is what true preservation is really about. I often think back to those antique shops filled with anonymous family photographs, wedding portraits, baby pictures, military uniforms, family gatherings, entire lives reduced to unidentified images in a box. And then I think about the kindness of the stranger who returned those photographs of my husband's grandfather to our family because someone had written names on the back, because someone had preserved just enough information. Those photographs found their way home, and that is the power of preserving stories along with photographs. One labeled image today may someday become a priceless connection for someone generations from now. So if you have family photographs sitting in boxes, albums, drawers, phones, or computer folders, I encourage you to begin, not perfectly and not all at once, but just begin. Identify one photograph, write down one name, record one story, because every preserved memory matters. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of the Time Capsule Podcast. If this episode inspired you to begin preserving the stories behind your family photographs, I invite you to visit ancestryseeking.com, where you can download the free photo identification checklist that accompanies this episode and article. The checklist will help you identify important details, organize physical and digital photos, record family stories, and preserve memories before they are lost. And if you know someone with boxes of unidentified family photographs tucked away in closets or albums, please consider sharing this episode with them. Together, we can help preserve not just photographs, but the stories and identities behind them. Until next time, remember, your family history is more than the past. It is a legacy worth preserving. And don't forget to follow or subscribe to the Time Capsule Podcast so new episodes automatically appear in your favorite podcast app.